My first large smartphone was a Samsung Galaxy Note 2, which at the time was one of the biggest flagship smartphones around. Then over time, I just continued getting the biggest flagship phones possible. But for the iPhone 13 series, I challenged myself to use this, the iPhone 13 mini. I thought switching to such a small phone would be difficult, but honestly, I love the form factor and wish there were more powerful but small phones like this one. But after just 2 months, I started to realize how limiting these types of phones can be, and really started to see why these types of phones aren't as popular with most people. And that's what I want to talk about today. Why I love small phones, why they'll never be as popular as large ones, and the future of small phones that seems to be more and more unclear as time goes on. What I love about smaller phones is exactly what you heard. How light and portable they are compared to pretty much everything else on the market. It feels like almost nothing in my hand. And I can type, swipe, and reach most of the screen with just one hand. I feel like a giant with it. Sliding it in my front pocket is really easy, and the top of the phone doesn't stick out like the max-sized iPhones do. And it pretty much fits in anything and anywhere. I know what I just said, and I'm not ashamed of it. It has similar performance to the other phones in the iPhone 13 lineup. Battery life usually lasts me a day, and it's also the cheapest of the latest generation iPhones. So obviously, the iPhone 13 mini has a lot going for it. So then why? Why does the iPhone mini series sell worse than the regular sized iPhone despite being $100 cheaper? Why has it gotten to the point where there are rumors that Apple plans to stop selling the mini phones altogether? Why are all the premium phones so big? I think we have to drill down into this thing to figure it out. But to sum it up, the thing holding the mini back is exactly what makes me and other people love it so much. Its size. The size of the phone is the one limiting factor about the phone that affects the iPhone 13 mini and pretty much any small phone in a huge way. Basically, size affects the battery, the screen size, and all of its features. The iPhone 13 mini does have good enough battery life to get you through the day. When you first get this phone, you'll probably only be charging it at night, or maybe once throughout a busy day. But most people hold onto their phones for about 2 to 3 years. And after that long, a lot of things can happen that will decrease the battery life of your smartphone. As batteries are used and age, they degrade, lowering how much charge your phone battery can hold. For older iPhones I owned, I think I averaged around 10% battery degradation a year. Software updates for your phone can also be more taxing on your battery life by being more resource intensive than the previous version and will require more juice throughout the day than it did 3 years ago. Those things, when combined, can decrease the battery life of a phone to where in about 2 years, you might only get through half a day before needing to charge it. And even if the battery life is good enough for a day, it won't be good enough for days when you really have to use it. For example, I took a trip recently and I had to use the iPhone 13 mini to constantly call Ubers, pull up maps, and check into hotels. Most days on that trip, the phone just couldn't last a whole day without needing to charge up again. And it was a pain to have to carry around a battery bank or make sure I stayed plugged in. That was counterintuitive to the small, light, and portableness I loved about small phones. Who cares about having a small phone if it's constantly on life support with the battery bank? With smaller phones, there's obviously less space, and the same goes for batteries too. Luckily, there is a bigger version of the iPhone 13 mini that we can compare it to. Obviously, that's the iPhone 13. The iPhone 13 mini has a smaller battery compared to its older brother, the iPhone 13. The iPhone 13 actually has 34% more battery capacity than the mini. While some of that is used by the bigger screen, the rest of the extra battery lets you use the phone longer compared to the 13 mini. So if you were trying to keep your phone for longer without replacing it or replacing the battery, I can see why people would lean to the bigger phone. Battery life is one of the most important parts of a smartphone, and small phones usually have less battery life compared to other similar but bigger phones because after you slap in those core components, there's less space left over for the battery. Then there's screen size. The iPhone 13 mini has a screen size of 5.4 inches. In today's smartphone landscape, that's small. That's baby, that's tiny. It makes it harder to use the phone for things other than as a phone. Playing games, reading, watching videos, and scrolling through social media are all a little harder to do on the mini, and also a little harder to see too. It's a lot easier to misclick on a tiny screen when you got big chubby fingers like me. Showing that one meme you thought was funny to your friend becomes unfunny when they need to grab your phone out of your hand to even read the caption right. And have you tried enlarging text sizes on the minis for your older relatives who don't see very well? It takes up way too much screen real estate. With the bigger phones, you can see more details, the keyboard is larger and easier to type on, and watching videos and playing games are more immersive. It's also a cost saver too. If you've got a big phone, who needs a tablet, right? Your phone could then be the device that does it all, saving you money, space, and it's more convenient, and you never have to worry about taking a tablet with you whenever you're traveling. A big phone really is a great middle ground between having a small phone and a big screen tablet. Why pay for two different devices when one device could do both good enough? And with foldable devices like Samsung's Z Fold and Z Flip, that's only going to get more and more true. But we'll talk more about that in a bit. The major downsides to larger displays is really the phones have to be bigger, which might not be a downside depending on the person, and that it's easier to see what other people are doing on their phone. Finally, small phones lack the features. And I don't mean they can't have similar features to bigger phones, but with a small phone, you can't shove the same hardware you would on a larger phone, and if you do, there will always be some trade-offs. You can't defeat physics, and if you can, congratulations, claim your Nobel Prize, and get out of here. To see what I mean, we can look at the two bigger brothers to the iPhone 13 mini. The iPhone 13 and iPhone 13 Pro. Take one good look at these phones and you can see that they're roughly the same size and shape, with the only obvious physical differences between them is that the iPhone 13 Pro has a third camera lens, and the iPhone 13 Pro had to make a compromise to do that. If you dig into the specs, the iPhone 13 Pro actually has a smaller sized battery than the iPhone 13. That's mostly taken up by this third camera lens. The iPhone 13 Pro actually has longer battery life though, because it uses a different display technology, but the point is, if these shared everything else being the same, the battery life would probably be shorter on the iPhone 13 Pro. So if the iPhone 13 mini were to have a third camera, or really any additional hardware features, I think the battery size would suffer. If, let's say, Apple wanted to shrink the battery in their bigger phones, they'd have to make more space in the body to add any kind of sensors or hardware they'd want. The mini doesn't have that luxury. The battery is already small, and shrinking it further to make room for other features would make owning it in the long term worse. So instead, a manufacturer could make the phone bigger, slap in a bigger battery, and add in more features, and charge more for a bigger phone because of those fancier features. So those are all the reasons that make small phones less appealing to most people, and even manufacturers. I mean, like I mentioned, throughout this video, the small size prevents the phone from having great battery life, prevents it from being on trend with giant displays, and prevents the phone from having a ton of extra features. Here in the US, a lot of people pay for a smartphone on a 24 or sometimes 30-month plan provided by one of the major carriers. And when you just look at the iPhone 13 mini and compare it to the regular size 13, it would only be about $4 more per month. That's less than a meal at McDonald's, and really easy to see why people would just opt for the bigger phone. But hey, form factor will always be important, right? There will always be a group of people who will want a small phone. But I think the definition of a small phone is kind of changing. I think there's a phone out there that by no means is perfect, because it's not, but it's heading in the direction I see small phones going. And the phone I'm talking about is the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3, a device with a relatively small footprint, but a pretty big display. Okay, sure, this device is expensive, but when this form factor really matures, think like 5 years from now, I think it can cover up for the many flaws of small phones. Will any of the major phone manufacturers make a phone as similar as the Z Flip? And will foldables ever become mainstream enough for this change to happen? Honestly, who knows, right? But it's also fun to think about. And hopefully small phones make a comeback, because honestly, I can't really think of many new premium smartphones with flagship level specs released within the last few years, other than like the iPhone 12 and 13 mini and the Google Pixel 5. And they're not really flagship phones at that. I guess at the end of the day, this is what I'm trying to say. Small phones are really, really cool, and they're so portable. But to most people, the trade-off of having a smaller phone doesn't outweigh many of the benefits of having a larger one. And while I was all for switching permanently to a small phone, after doing so for a while, I don't think I could ever go back, even if I love the form factor so much. But anyway, what do you personally think? Did I hit the nail on the head? Are these the reasons small phones don't sell well? Or do you disagree and think that it's something else altogether? Do you like using a small phone? Or do you think the trade-off of portability is worth all the extras you get with bigger devices? Let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your opinions on it. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and well, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Bye.